Our first speaker on the panel is Pat Fisken. Pat Fisken has been the head of the Apata Music Library at Dartmouth College since 1980, where she engages in administrative responsibilities, the supervision of staff, collection development in music and dance, and reference and education services. She held previous positions at Dartmouth as music cataloger and as a rare books assistant in special collections. Pat holds a master's degree in library science from Simmons College and a bachelor's of arts in music and Russian studies from Beloit College, where she studied piano and harpsichord. She grew up in upstate New York and Massachusetts and calls Vermont home. She serves as librarian for one of Dartmouth's first MOOCs in Italian opera and for a new MOOC in German opera to be launched in the spring of 2017. Our second speaker on the panel is Adam Nemeroff. Adam is an instructional designer at Dartmouth College and course lead for the OperaX series and several other MOOCs. He received his Bachelor's of Arts in History, Bachelor's of Science in Secondary Social Studies Teaching, and Master's of Arts in Curriculum and Instruction, all from the University of Connecticut. Adam is the, quote, first student in the opera course. Prior to this project, he had no exposure to opera and now loves it. Though he considered himself a mediocre trumpet player in elementary through high school, nevertheless, music continues to play a crucial role in Adam's life. In middle school, Adam's band played the overture to The Barber of Seville. An opera course later, many of the aspects of that band class now make much more sense. Our third speaker on the panel is Memory Apata. Memory Apata is a southern fried New Englander from Little Rock, Arkansas. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Music and German from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, with a specialization in vocal performance. Memory began her work at the Apata Music Library as the Music Library Collections Specialist in 2015 and moved to her position as Music Library Supervisor in 2016. Her work includes student supervision, circulations management, exhibits, social media, and education and outreach. She has worked as the lead teaching assistant for 3 Dartmouth MOOCs on Italian opera and American Renaissance literature. Memory performs with the Ariel Camerata, a professional chamber choir out of Albany, New York, and is a charter member of the recently founded Upper Valley Chamber Collective. She is currently pursuing a Master's of Arts in Liberal Studies at Dartmouth College. This morning's presentation is titled OperaX, Convening Campus Ensembles to Create MOOCs. Please join me in welcoming Pat, Adam, and Memory.
Debut over 400 years ago to our world today, opera has entertained and enthralled generation after generation of audiences, from those in the highest echelons of power in Vienna and London to miners and prospectors looking for their fortunes in the Wild West. It has spread from its birthplace in Florence, Italy, to every corner of the earth. When we talk of divas and prima donnas, we are talking the language of opera, and opera's music and attitudes appear in movies, commercials, TV shows, and video games that millions of people around the world experience today. We'll develop tools and strategies that will allow us to derive even more enjoyment from a form of human endeavor that amazes us with its beauty. Come and join me, Steve Swain, professor of music at Dartmouth College, on an exploration of this always fascinating and remarkably resilient expression of human imagination and creativity. Learn with me what makes these works of art so compelling, and increase your appreciation for how the music of opera carries within it the drama of the stories that artists throughout the ages have chosen to tell us, using the medium of music.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who's going to tell us a little bit about how we got there.
think we're here to describe the development process of the Italian opera MOOC at Dartmouth, you're correct. Adam will describe this, as well as analyze areas where library expertise and resources are necessary. Then, Memory will describe our involvement in this MOOC, how our involvement in this MOOC impacted our goals and strategies related to teaching and outreach in the library. But first, I would like to introduce you to the magical process of convening a team or ensemble to design, develop, and teach a massive open online course, as we experienced it. At the end of this presentation, we'd like to have all of you put your heads together and share ways you may have already collaborated across your campuses or communities, or to imagine ways you might collaboratively create learning experiences to benefit your students or community members. It was the fall of 2014, and Dartmouth had recently joined edX, and faculty across campus had submitted proposals for MOOCs in various subjects. 4 were chosen from the departments of Environmental Science, Engineering, English, and Music. Specialists from IT instructional design, media production, and the libraries were gathered to meet with chosen faculty and to form teams to move forward. Many of us had never met one another, and we were expected to collaborate in ways we had never done before. During the course of the next year, and it took that long for the OperaX team to pull off this initial assignment, we indeed created a MOOC on Italian opera that we felt was successful. But what we didn't expect was that our biggest success was developing an effective team. Everyone on the team rose to the challenge of collaborating in the best sense as we came to understand and respect one another's special skills, talents, and creativity, not to mention our quirks. We were able to fine-tune our communications and processes to a well-oiled machine ready to take on new challenges together. The magic began as we started meeting, at least weekly, getting to know one another and putting our imaginative ideas together. Steve Swain, professor of music, had some ideas in mind based upon his general classroom course on opera, and wisely began by calling us together for one of his lectures on the marriage of Figaro. After that, we all attended a Met HD broadcast of the opera at Dartmouth. That's when Adam, our instructional designer and OperaX team leader, instantly fell in love with opera and became our first student. We were all inspired, fell in love with our assignment and with one another. Our faculty member had gotten us off to a good start. Not only was Adam our first student, but he had just recently been hired at Dartmouth and brought incredible leadership, maturity, listening skills, and design capability to make the best of his new cast of characters. Daniel Maxwell Crosby from media production was also new to opera, and he was able to bring his storytelling skills to the table. I, as the course librarian, was charged with finding content for the MOOC, doing research and developing new content, and helping to address copyright issues. From the very beginning, we all had a significant role in helping to design and develop the MOOC as a team. Eventually, Sawyer Broadley from media production was able to bring his animation skills to the table, and David Bowden from the music library was able to help with digitization of content. Later on, Memory Apata, then new to the staff of the music library, was a vocalist and opera lover, and fit in perfectly as our head teaching assistant for the Italian opera MOOC. She also offered invaluable feedback, helping to fine-tune the MOOC as we approached its launch in October of last year. An ensemble was born, grew, and flourished. Our team had just launched round 2 of the Italian opera MOOC earlier this week, and before long we will begin putting together a German opera MOOC which we launched in April. It has been a real pleasure working with all of these folks. I would now like to turn this over to Adam, who will describe MOOCs and the course development process and analyze areas where library expertise and resources are necessary.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. So we have 2 big goals for our conversation today. We're hoping, as Pat started us off, to introduce you a little bit to the story of OperaX and how it happened in our and then hopefully will lead you to talking about where it led us and perhaps where it might help you to inform works with your teams on your campuses. So one of the questions we always get is, why do MOOCs? Why would Dartmouth put resources into doing this? It seems kind of like a drain on resources, which when we all tally up the time that we put into this, it can often seem that way. But I want to talk really briefly about the ways in which we often think about MOOCs in the context of our work on campus. So we typically have 3 goals that we look at that are actually partially informed by what the edX Consortium used as their initial mission when they started making MOOCs a few years back. So our first goal is creating access to these learning experiences for people across the world. We're really concerned with the second idea, which is blending it. So we're investing all of these resources, and we need to bring these things back to campus as well. And how might that help us do it? I think this project has been really interesting because there's some really surprising things we've blended and brought back to campus and our team itself. We also are trying to carve out a space for innovation and thinking about research and development. So it's great to have a space where you can try things, fail, learn from them, and then ultimately think about what implications there are for our work. So going into this process, I'm an instructional designer. I'm going to talk a little bit about what instructional designers do. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's a little bit different in a MOOC case. How many people have heard of the term instructional designer? I always love, oh wow, this is awesome, yes. So I'll breeze through that. So basically what instructional designers do is we're professional educators. We typically have backgrounds in curriculum instruction or instructional design or educational technologies. And we collaborate with faculty across all of these types of projects that we work on, the MOOCs included as well as residential courses, to help them design, develop, implement, and ultimately assess their learning experiences to improve student learning. So that's true in all of these, and I would say that's definitely true in this one specifically. It's just a slightly different scale, I think, in this case. So one of the things that instructional designers use as far as tools in our kind of toolbox is backwards design. I love talking about backwards design, and I'd be remiss as an instructional designer if I didn't mention it. So typically what this idea is it's a curriculum design framework where we think about what is it we're trying to do, what do we want students to be able to know and do, how will we know that they did that, what evidence can we see, what evidence can be measured, and then what experiences and activities would they ultimately use to get to that point. So this is a little bit different, and I'd be curious to talk to Pat about this in more detail at some point. We've talked a little bit about it, but typically when a faculty member goes to write a syllabus, they might start with content. They're like, these are the readings or the music I need to include. Our idea is we really try and reset that process to be more intentional about how we make those decisions. But if anything, it places even more importance on the types of content and other things we do. So with backwards design, that's one of the key starting points for our conversation. The other piece that I think I added specifically into this project is helping to think through project management and tech that we're using. So there's a lot of pieces to manage as part of the MOOC happening. There's a whole lot of time, there's a whole lot of tasks that have to get done. One of the things I think I was helpful with was pulling together our team to do that. We also, with our background in educational technologies, are often aware of really helpful technologies that might be in that innovation space where we could try things in the MOOC, possibly bring it to campus. Cerigo, which is a really cool mind-based education testing tool, was one of these examples in this course, which is super cool and you should check it out later. We also, coming out of the experience that Pat talked about when we went to the first Opera, I sat down with the team the week after and I said, what is it that we're trying to do? What do we want students to be able to know and do? And what are the ways that we should place focuses on some of those things and not others? This is a really common way that you might use as a tool in thinking through that as a team. That purple circle in the middle is what's called an enduring understanding. And the idea is if you want your students to be able to do something years from now, coming out of your learning experience, you need to put time and energy into doing that. So we did this for the opera course, and we realized that the opera history, the specific plot points, some of those things weren't as important as we initially thought. And we started to realize that giving students tools like the conventions that they would see, and the styles, and the ways they need to listen, and ultimately helping them to connect that the drama and the music are inherently intertwined. This became a big revealing moment for us and kind of, I think, set us on a trajectory for what we did. So one of the things that we did at that point is we drafted out a course plan. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail with this. My goal is really just to show you what our course kind of looked like. So we broke the course into 2 parts. When we realized that we really needed to help students to transfer these skills of listening to opera, we decided that they needed a toolbox to do that. So in conversation with the whole team and debriefing our own experiences with opera, we designed out the first 3 weeks, and we said, okay, we need to help them with close listening. We need to help them with using history as a tool. And we need them to be able to understand the conventions that they would see if they went to see an Italian opera at the Met today, and the types of things that help them in unpacking that experience. At that point, we realized, along the lines of the introduction of Bennington's inquiry-based learning, we needed to give students the opportunity to actually apply these things and try them out. So the second part of the course was entirely based around looking at key composers in Italian opera, and really piecing apart what these skills look like in those cases. So that's our 6-week course. So what goes into a course like this? Based on the backwards design, based on the team conversations, and outlining all of this together, this is just week 1 of the course. I always love showing this, partially for the shock and awe. But this is everything that happened in the first week on a whiteboard wall. And the idea is we spend a lot of time planning and making sure these pieces fit together the way we want them to. And also identifying the capabilities we need to actually pull it off. And that brings me to what I don't do. So I've talked a lot about me, which I don't like doing. And one of the things that's really awesome about our collaboration experience is it taught me what I'm good at and what I'm not, and why the team is the most important element. So one of the ways in which I most often work with faculty is often like the 2 of us working together to design specific activities in their course. This totally blew that up for I think, for both me and Steve, because we started to realize that we needed these other skills and expertise to pull this off. So we were able to bring in our library colleagues and media producers to help with subject matter expertise, issues of copyright access, needs as far as acquisition, producing the instructional media, making the videos, and addressing the community needs and engagement in the course. So Memory is going to talk a little bit more about what the library did as a part of this.
So I think that leading from Adam's discussion of what instructional designers don't do leads really well into what the library does do. And I want to frame this. First of all, I should tell you that I acted as an ed tech employee on this project mainly, and got to blend in library work, which was really cool. So I functioned as a teaching assistant, and what that looks like in a MOOC, it's basically like a Facebook wall or a Reddit post. I did mainly student engagement, so I was in the discussion board listening to what the students wanted and making sure that they had all the support that they needed. So going into this project, I wanted to make sure that I was keeping the library and their goals at the forefront of my work. And the way that I did that was looking at the Dartmouth library goals for the year, and we have way more than 3. But these were the ones that I felt aligned best with the Dartmouth X goals, which Adam outlined earlier. So number 1 is developing information resources and services that support research and education at Dartmouth. Number 2 was marketing the library's information resources and services to all the library's communities. And we'll talk a little bit about how that community changed in this project. And lastly, institutional collaboration, which is pretty self-explanatory. The library wants to be involved in big projects on campus. So I'm going to go back because this slide toggles back and forth and it can give you a little whiplash. I want to frame the information part of the equation by talking about how we would approach a course from a residential perspective and then move on to the MOOC perspective. So when Pat is a course librarian, and many of you who work in academic libraries are familiar with this, she will create a reserve shelf, either digitally or physically. She'll build the collection to make sure that students have all of the materials that they need for the course. And she'll also provide some research support. So often in intro courses, you'll bring the class into the library, take a little tour, and learn how to use the library catalog. So we wanted to do kind of the same thing in the MOOC, but we realized that we were shifting perspective from a class that maybe had 5 to 20 students to a class with 6,000 plus students. And we were also shifting from a course where you could bring people into the library to a course where you don't know anything about your students other than their screen name. You don't know what they look like, their background, nothing. If they have access to internet, etc. So when we were building our course reserves, we started by finding resources that were free and high quality. So those would be things, the productions that you can easily access from your computer. Obviously, YouTube has a lot of full productions of opera, but they're not always quality productions, and they're not always legal recordings of those productions. So we wanted to kind of divert those types of resources. And we did that by providing a list of things like the Met Opera on Demand, Medici.tv, and some of these were not free, but we felt like they were really good resources that you wouldn't want to leave off of the list. We also built our physical collection in Paddock. So instead of having one production of a particular Italian opera, we now have 3 or 4 productions of a particular Italian opera, which as above, I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. Pat also did some help with citations for the faculty member by creating what we called baseball cards, but they were classical baseball cards. I can't get it to change. Okay. Ta-da! Okay, so this is our classical baseball card for Giuseppe Verdi, and it just has a little bit of background information, and we did try to use as many open source images as, not open source, what am I trying to say? Creative Commons images as possible. She also provided a little background information, so when Steve mentions Traviata, something, Traviata, and we have a little bit of information about the premiere and the composer. She also did citation works with Violetta Dies, and that is the recording that we used. I love that. It's so dramatic. My part in this course reserves list was a little more interesting to me because I am such an opera lover. So I was interacting with students in the discussion boards, and I found that we had kind of a split between students who really loved comedies and students who really loved dramas and tragedies, and there wasn't really an in-between. So in the second half of the course, Act 2, when we had people go out and apply the skills that they learned in Act 1, I made lists of 6 or so operas, half will be comedies, half will be dramas, and provided the students with access to them. I tried to pick things that were available through the resources I mentioned earlier. And this is a photo of my favorite place in the world, the Metropolitan Opera. And I'm bringing up the Met for several reasons. So Adam had this great idea, because the source was not free, to contact the Met and get our students a discount for Met on Demand. Things started out really well. This is all done over email. And things started out really well. The Met representative said, sure, we'd love to provide that discount for your students, but by the way, are you using any productions other than Met productions in your lectures? And Adam said, well, yes, is that a problem? And they said, absolutely, it's a problem. The Met will not have any of our productions associated with any other house because the Met name is that important. And it's true, you know, in the United States, when you think about opera, you pretty much think about the Met. So the representative from the Met kind of made us feel like if we didn't go only with their productions, that they might pursue legal action. So we had a meeting, and we all sat down around the table and had to make not to use them. However, our faculty member, Steve Swain, was a little fed up, and he finally just threw up his hands, and we had a second mantra. So the first mantra was, the music conveys the drama. And the second mantra was, let's get sued. That was a pretty fun meeting. But we realized that the worst thing that could happen if we used a production and didn't ask permission was that we would get a takedown notice. So we decided to take fair use to its full extent. And throughout, it's worth mentioning that we did consult the college's general counsel, who said that fair use is the way to go. We couldn't possibly get in trouble the way that we were using it. We were using excerpts from the operas, not full operas, and we were transforming the use of those excerpts. So we weren't just saying, here's a clip of Susanna and Figaro singing to each other. Enjoy. We were saying, see how Figaro has his own melody, Susanna has her own melody, and they're having an argument. And by the end of the duet, Figaro is singing Susanna's melody, and there's a consensus. So we were doing that sort of transformative use of the excerpts. And I also wanted to include this picture of myself at the Met because this is my very first time there. And one second after this photo was taken, an usher came up and said, "You can't take that picture." Those are all copyrighted. So that was our copyright issues. I want to go back to the library mission and goals just to give you a primer for the next slide, which is about marketing. So normally in a residential course, we don't do that much marketing for the course itself. At Dartmouth, some courses might have a poster that we put up. But for OperaX, we did quite a bit actually. We had a little collection showcase. We advertised the course through several listservs, through MLA, through YAML, Opera America, and our faculty member sent a listserv out to the American Musicological Society. And we also were involved in a lot of the social media. So lastly is collaboration, institutional collaboration. We were just representatives of the library at these meetings that we had every week. Adam made sure that the library felt like we were full contributors to the development of this course. So we weren't just saying, oh, that needs a citation there. We were saying things like, maybe that excerpt needs to be longer so that the students can better understand. I didn't understand it. Or we got to send in our own little edits for each version of a lecture that would come out. And we, through that process, got to learn a lot about instructional design and backwards design, and really integrated that into our teaching from the library. So one of the major themes of our group was interdisciplinary collaboration, and I have a few photos here of what has been spurred from our OperaX collaboration. So the top is just a collections showcase, but it's for a different Dartmouth MOOC that had nothing to do with music. It's on American Renaissance literature. But we felt like Paddock had a lot of resources to advertise that course. So the authors were people like Daniel Hawthorne, I'm blanking right now, Melville, people like that, who have actually inspired a lot of music, so we felt like we could help them out. We are also thinking about ways to collaborate with resources that might not normally go together. So Paddock Music Library is located across the hallway from the studio art corridor at Dartmouth, so the wood shop, the jewelry shop, the ceramic studio. And we thought, well, why not collaborate across that difference and make our own instruments? So you'll see in the bottom right corner there, a student worker, Cheryl Chang, is making her own diddly bow, which we got to display and had a whole blues exhibit. It's great. And lastly, Adam was instructional designing for a history course, and these were students who had never taken a music class ever, but the professor wanted to frame each lecture with music, so we got to help curate that playlist of funk, disco, rock, anything from the 70s, and she would give lectures on economics, social injustice. So that was a really cool thing. And the history students came to Paddock Music Library to see how music could inform their research, which I thought was really, really cool. So that's what came out of our collaboration. I think Adam's gonna talk about what's coming up next for us.
Sure. Yeah, so just very briefly, so a couple other spin-off projects. Pat mentioned that we're getting ready to do a German course in the spring. We just couldn't break up the band, yeah. So we've had so much fun working together, and our students have loved the course. They keep on telling us, do more. So we also, what was different with the German course is in between starting development of that and our first implementation of Italian opera, Steve taught his intro to all of opera on campus this past spring. So we made the crazy decision that we were going to start making some videos for this future MOOC and for Steve's students to give us feedback. Because he had a semi-flipped course, but we only had one cultural area for that. So we started using this brand new studio that was on campus, and we were able to pull together those resources really quickly because our team was well-oiled machine, as Pat pointed out. On the bottom right is an example of one of the videos where Steve is talking about Wagner and leitmotifs and Star Wars as an example of that. So where to next? Do you want to talk about this, Memory?
Sure. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just stay here. Oh, there's also this guy. So going back to what I was saying about backwards design informing our teaching at the library, we're starting to think about, I'm a student supervisor at Paddock, and I began to think of student employees more as it sounds silly to say it this way, but more as students than employees. So I was taking a look at my predecessor's manual for the position and thinking, this actually sounds a lot like a course and a lot less like a job. And we have a lot of all of our student employees at Dartmouth have some kind of musical background, and a lot of them are music majors. And I'm thinking, well, this is a transferable skill. Not everybody's going to have a principal job in an orchestra, and students aren't necessarily thinking that way. So we're trying to revamp our training materials to get them to realize that this is a learning experience, not just a job where you sit and check books in and out. So we're giving them a lot more agency. So for instance, Cheryl Jane, who was also the person who did the diddly bows, she's taken a real interest in the library. And she's going to be performing the Nielsen Flute Concerto with the Dartmouth Symphony Orchestra. And I asked her to go ahead and make an exhibit on Nielsen and Paddock. So giving them that agency really has brightened some of our students in the library. And we're also using the library staff as TAs in the current iteration of IT OperaX, which is a really interesting situation. So they're sitting at the circulation desk. They're fully aware of patrons, but at the same time, they're responding to discussion posts on edX, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Let me check time. So we're kind of a little bit shorter on time, but I want to take a moment and put a question to the audience, and I want to ask you to think about either individually or turning to the person next to you. What's an example of a project that you've had on campus where you've convened your own kind of cross-campus ensemble to pull it off? What was that like? How did that change the outcome of the project? And then we'll come back together and talk about that briefly in maybe a minute or so. And then we'll go on to questions. What are some of the projects that people are interested in sharing?
Just tell me.
Somebody must
Oh my
share.
gosh, you guys are talking so much, come on.
Well, Joe,
Oh, okay, here we go, Joe.
So I was just telling Zoe about a couple of years ago, we, of course, like many of you, we have web guides on our website, and a student approached us and wanted to do her own web guide. And Oceana, who was here earlier, is really open and receptive and wants the students to feel a sense of ownership in the library. So we were like, yeah, that's cool. So the student was from Pakistan and had strong interest in what was going on over there in terms of drones being used in military applications. And so, so we kind of set her up with access, which is often a sort of sacrosanct. You know, librarians don't often want to let people in, but we let her do the whole thing with a little bit of guidance from library staff. And she came up with I don't remember off the top of my head the whole thing, but it looked a lot different from our lit guides. It wasn't, the emphasis was less on, you know, what resources are in the library for this topic. It was more geared towards external news sources, but also she had done some graphic representations of things to kind of demonstrate. She did some original work on there. So that was just kind of a neat way that it was a kind of different collaboration.
What a great way of rethinking something like a capstone experience or, you know, an undergraduate thesis. That would be really neat.
Yeah.
Great.
I think Jared
Jared, please.
has the sound deck.
Yeah, I have a follow-up with the live thing we did at Holy Cross. As you all know, I've been there a little over a year, and as the new person, I was asked to do a book talk on Martin Luther King Jr. It was on MLK Day with the Office of Multicultural Diversity and Inclusion, and I decided to create a live guide for that. It's something basic, I know, but I decided to outline all of the music resources of songs that have been written about MLK and all of that stuff that most people who read the book wouldn't have been familiar with. And what happened from that is that now the Office of Diversity has petitioned the library to create live guides for all sessions that they have that deal with controversial topics, which is sort of an active form that they do for the students once every 2 or 3 weeks. So that was, again, a sort of a cross-campus collaboration that I didn't expect to happen, but it seems to be working so far. So, but certainly not on the scale of what you've done.
No, but the collaboration is what matters. That's cool.
Should we go ahead and take questions? I'm sure
I
we're
think so,
running a
yeah.
little short on
Yeah,
time. Any questions?
So I take a slightly simple approach on MOOCs that this is essentially just a form of marketing for universities, that it's either to get people to take their paid online courses or to show that we are the forefront of research in this field. So in terms of institutional financial support, if this is taking up your time, if this is requiring more staff, whose budget is this coming from and has this been an issue yet?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's something we think a lot about as being stewards of those resources. And it's something that's shifting now a lot more as well. So our initial funding was for 3 years for 4 courses to run, as well as a second round of proposals that's kind of starting off in year 3. And the idea was nobody was interested in making money off of this. It was kind of like an R&D space where we were like, we want to try to convene campus teams, we want to bring these things back to campus. We've made like negligible amounts of money. I don't even think there has been money from verified.
$50.
Yeah, so every student can pay $50 for a verified certificate, but there's a profit sharing thing with edX where we're not even at a point where that's a factor. So we're trying to think more creatively in the future about if we want to stand up these things and the teams and to engage students in some of these projects, which is where a lot of this is moving. That's typically where most of our MOOC work is moving, which is different than edX and a couple of other partners, which is food for thought too.
In the context of the library, we now have a digital learning librarian that Kate Harding is. Yeah, I had a talk with our digital learning librarian, who is basically the MOOC librarian, and moving into my new full-time position at Apata, I said I'm really invested in this team, and I used to be split between the educational technologies and the library. They were very firm boundaries, and now it's a great question, and I'm not sure that we're able to answer it just now. But I had a talk with her, and I said, look, none of my time is protected to work on this project. So I think we should be honest and say it's not exactly as clear as we would want it to be.
What was your experience working with the edX platform? Was there anything using that platform that limited what you could do in terms of designing the course?
I'm going to take this one because I was a TA, and the discussion boards are abysmal. It's so hard to get people to talk to one another because you can't find, if someone replies to your comment, you can never find it. You never know. And Dartmouth has tried a couple different ways to address that question. The first was going to a different platform entirely called Yellow Dig. So there was one little button in the edX discussion board that said, no discussion will take place here, go to Yellow Dig, which worked kind of well, but backfired in the sense that a lot of the people who are taking MOOCs are not super technically savvy, ironically. So there were a lot of complaints like, now I have to learn this entirely new tool. So we're back to edX discussion boards, and they know that we hate them because we complain about it every time we go to campus.
We have time for one more question.
Please.
In addition to the teams and the personnel developments, what else have moves like this been able to bring back to campus?
I think you should talk about Steve's revolution in teaching.
Yeah, so Steve is a mid-career faculty member. He's been at Dartmouth probably for about 15, 16 years now. He's really well established in his field, and he's really used to doing things on his own, and I think that's partially being a musicologist and stuff. That's just, they live in archives. And so it was really interesting to see how his approach changed and how he thinks about his teaching differently. So I think that's a really big thing, is just the mindset of teaching as team-based is a huge part of it. I think also that Steve's course is totally different now. He's totally shifted the way he presents information from being very lecture-driven to being very student-centered and inquiry-driven. He tells the students, watch the operas ahead of class, watch the videos to prepare you to watch the operas ahead of class, and then bring your moments in. Let's talk about where you saw this happening in the opera. And his students, the class in the spring was a very small seminar, which is so ironic considering we had 6,000 students in the first round of the course. But they are totally engaged in a way that he's never seen students engaged in his course. And they're just super interested in it, and the alums is another thing that I think has been blended back, is this has become a huge space for us to reach out to alums, both students that Steve has had on campus, as well as just a growing group where we could say, here are lifelong learning experiences for you to connect with Dartmouth. And in about a month from now, we're doing an on-location event in San Francisco, where we're inviting the alumni chapter there to take the MOOC, to come to go to see Aida, and then we're getting together to talk about it, which should be fun.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
Thank you.